Hi, I'm Steve. This is my book, Everyday Spirituality for Everyone. Thanks for joining me. I want to get right to the main point of the book, which is that, in my view, we all are spiritual beings. And what I mean by that is we start life with a sense of connection to everything that's around us, others, the world, and perhaps a force that some call God. And then we start to think of ourselves as separate individuals with a past and a future. And then we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back to that sense of connection. But don't worry, this story has a happy ending, so hang in there. I want to divide this into two parts, a little bit about me, and then we'll get into the book. If you want to contact me, you can email me at steve@thefutureofdemocracy.net. That's steve@thefutureofdemocracy, one word, .net. As you'll find out throughout this talk, I'm a great believer in constructive dialogue. So, a little bit about me and how I got that way, as I like to phrase it. My earliest memory goes back to when I was maybe a year and a half or 2 years old. I went with my mother to visit my grandmother in her store in Chicago. My grandmother was an immigrant from Ukraine. She had a store where she had to be 7 days a week. So the only way to visit her was to go to her store and see her in between customers. I felt a sense of connection to everything around me, my mother and my grandmother, even though I was pre-verbal. And at one point, my mother got into what seemed to be an argument with a friend. At least by her body language, she pulled herself out of being with me in the present moment and was focusing on the past or the future. I couldn't tell exactly. But that moment has stuck with me ever since. So if any of you ever find yourself focusing on the past or the future to the exclusion of the present, then this book and this talk may be of some value to you. I went to school, just like we all did. Typical lesson was 4 plus 4 equals spit it back on a test. Or we would have a lesson in history. What year did Columbus sail the blue? Spit it back on a test. We all had our raunchy endings for that one. And it seemed to me all the way through school, right up to the time I was finishing high school, that the lessons I was given really weren't relevant to my life. They didn't really give me a sense of competence or confidence. They didn't teach me about how to communicate better with other people. So that was a bit of a problem for me. I was also going to what was called Hebrew school about 3 days a week. And the lessons were similar. We were told about what happened in the Bible, the story of Abraham or the story of Moses, but again, it was just write it down on the test. I also went to services on the weekend, and we would read from the Bible, but again, I never got a sense of spirituality, a sense of what does that mean for my day-to-day experience? How does that enrich my life? So when I was 17, a high school counselor who kind of knew what I was about handed me a brochure for a place called Shimer College, where I ended up going. And at Shimer College, instead of being given a test on what it says in a textbook, we had to read original materials. So instead of being told what Newton said or what Einstein said, we had to read them in the original, in translation, of course. And then we had to come up with our own idea about what they were saying, which for my poor brain was quite a challenge because no one had ever expected me to do that before. And then in our seminar classes of about 12 to 15, we had to defend our idea about what we thought the authors were saying. And I found out very quickly that my idea of what was true was not necessarily true. But probably the most important skill I gained in that situation was that I had to work with others toward a common sense of understanding. Now imagine if our legislators had to sit in a room until they came up with a common sense of understanding. I think that our world would be a better place. Or if we had to do that in our workplace, I think our workplace would be more functional. or if we had to do that in our family, I think our families would probably work a lot better. So after that, I came out to California and got involved in what was called the alternative school movement. We had kids that were maybe 10 years old who were somewhat rebellious in school. They were bright and bored and they couldn't read. We had some kids with learning disabilities. So instead of saying, here is math facts, put it down in a test, we would say, what are you interested in? Are you interested in horses? Yeah. Are you interested in volcanoes or earthquakes? Yeah. So we'd say, okay, we're going to take a camping trip to the earthquake exhibit in the national park north of San Francisco, and we're going to plan the trip together. Here's a book about earthquakes. And guess what? Kids who couldn't read at the age of 10 all of a sudden could read within 3 months. No problem, because they were enthusiastic about what we were discussing. And then they'd have to plan the itinerary, and then they'd have to plan the menu. So there is your writing skills and your math skills, all included in things that they were very interested in. A very important part of the school also was every morning we would plan our day together in a democratic way, and the kids learn how to communicate with each other. And if they had a dispute, we'd say, go in this room over there and work it out between you. If you can't, then we'll help you. So we called that rule number 1, where the kids actually had to work things out. And they became much more competent and confident, both in their skills and in their ability to interact with others. So eventually I started to do classes also for some of the parents in the school on communication skills and parenting skills. And about that time, I got involved in studying all the religions I could find out about. I started going to services for different religions. I started studying with different teachers about spirituality, and I started working on my degree in psychology. And about 1980, my cousin and I started a center in San Francisco where we taught communication skills. It was a part of what they called the Human Potential Movement. And we also had people come in who were well-known teachers. One of the most popular was Paul Rebelo, who came from Esalen, and he did a class in the hero's journey. And not only was it a class, but it was a workshop where we all enacted the roles of our heroes. And you might ask, well, what was the value of that? All of us, from the time we are very, very little, we take on heroes. And the reason we do that is to give us a model for how we actually should act in our lives. So our parents are usually our first heroes, and then eventually we take on heroes that are part of our society. For example, Superman was my hero when I was about 5. I used to fly off the couch and didn't hurt myself too badly. But today, heroes for young people are Wonder Woman or the Black Panther. One of my favorites is Eddie Murphy in Coming to America. He goes through all of the phases of the hero's journey. So let me tell you about those different phases. According to Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell, who had a very popular TV show and also wrote a lot of books, the hero is sitting at home and not too busy, and someone comes along and says, we need you to be involved in this adventure. And the hero usually resists at first, but then says, okay. And then the hero goes through a number of adventures, culminating in what you might call the ultimate test, where the hero has to dig deeply into his or her mind, a place where he or she had never gone before, or rely on an outside entity to provide more courage. So this is something that that we all go through in our lives. So after that, eventually I got involved in doing workshops for nonprofits to help them get a sense of purpose and to align their staff with their purpose to improve their communication skills. And about 1995, my partner and I started a agency for people who were very disabled in the San Francisco East Bay. We had children who were in feeding tubes or breathing machines. They were in wheelchairs for all their lives. We had some people who were older. And the way that we taught our staff to provide good care was getting together again and talking about what is the best type of care we can provide for these very disabled residents. A lot of our staff only had, in many cases, just a high school degree. We had kind of a limited budget from the state, so we were limited in how much we could pay them. We also had doctors and nurses on our staff. But what I think made this work well was that we recognized the ability of our staff to, again, dig deeply and to be competent and confident in their abilities. We encouraged them. We showed faith in their ability to do things, and that also translated into their believing in themselves because we believed in them. There's been a lot of studies out there that show that in the workplace and also in school settings, the extent to which teachers show faith in their students or employers show faith in their employees is the extent to which they are able to do their jobs better or study better or become more independent. So I retired about 3 years ago. I've been writing books and giving talks. And that's about it for me. I want to get into the book now a little bit. The book has 3 chapters and an introduction. In the introduction, I say, spirituality, as I will use it in these pages, is what connects us with what is outside of ourselves, others, the world, or an unseen force that some call God. And then on page 4 of the book, I introduce an idea that you may not have heard before, maybe a little bit unusual for you, but this is basically the theme of the book. The fulfillment we desire cannot be attained by anything we pursue or acquire. And what I mean by that is throughout the book and throughout our lives, we try lots of different things. Some are spiritual, some are not, and we try to get a sense of fulfillment, but ultimately our fulfillment comes not from what we do or attempt, but from our willingness or ability to open up to our experience when we actually go through that. And we'll be getting to that quite a bit more. On page 4, again, what I have written here reflects my current views, which are subject to revision as I continue the never-ending process of learning. So I consider myself to be a lifelong learner. I meet people on the street, I talk to them, I try to learn things. What's your point of view and what do you think about things? I read a lot, and I've been honing my views for about 50 years. But who knows, 50 years from now, I may have a whole different view of things. We'll have to wait and see. The first chapter is called The Quest, which again traces that idea of the journey right from the beginning, from the call, when the hero gets the call. And this is on page 7. As far back as we can see, there always has been the myth of the hero, that larger-than-life individual whose journey results in eternal fulfillment. We look to our heroes as models for how to live in perfect faith. So our heroes, again, go through all those phases. And, well, actually, they wouldn't be our heroes unless they succeeded, right? So in almost all cases, they do succeed in their quest. On page 9, the goal of our heroes, and thus each of us, is overcoming all challenges and vanquishing all foes. Their quest brings them and us the success and recognition we seek. So what I mean by that is we live our lives to a large extent vicariously through our heroes. When they succeed, we get a sense that we have succeeded also. And this is why we're so attached to our heroic myths, going back to Greek mythology and right up to video games in the present. That's why these stories and these myths are so important to us. On page 10, some writers have called the state we seek the eternal return. And what I mean by that is somewhere in the back of our minds, we have an idea that, again, we were connected, that things were better, we were children, Or maybe there's an idea we have about mythologically that there was a Garden of Eden somewhere. So we hold on to that idea of a utopia or a perfect place in our minds, and the eternal return is about that. And we say to ourselves, if only I had a great relationship, then I would be fulfilled. If only I had enough money, or if only the world would change or people would treat me better, then I'd be happy, right? What I call this is if onlyism. It's a little phrase that I invented. I actually have copyrighted that, but since you're listening to this video, I'll let you use it. On page 12, relationships, careers, possessions, spiritual practice, and all else we pursue never in themselves are enough to satisfy us for long. Nothing we try seems to grant us long-term peace, because in our minds we always return to what is missing. It is that lost feeling of fulfillment we seek, but we don't know how to reignite it. So the difference between our heroes and ourselves is that their adventure has a beginning, a middle, and an end. But we have to keep on going. So how do we take the principles or ideas or the vision of our heroes and these heroic myths into our own lives? The second chapter is called The Path, and this is about specific ways that we pursue our goals. Some of them spiritual, and some of them not. On page 22, some of our paths appear to work, at least for a while, to bring us success in our quest, and others seem not to work at all. Among them are religious practices, human relationships, career advancement, financial pursuits, competition with others, civic engagement, self-improvement, the arts, food and drink, personality cults, body worship, meditation, exercise, sex, massage, yoga, various therapies, consciousness-altering drugs, and seeking truth. And that's just a partial list of the things that we try. In the spiritual realm, as most of us know, back a long, long time ago, into prehistory, there have always been tribes who relied on their shamans. And the shamans would engage their tribe members in rituals, but it wasn't just an exercise. They had to dig more deeply or rely on an outside source to give them courage so they could go into the hunt or possibly into battle. Hinduism, as far as we know, is the oldest established religion. And I should mention that Hinduism, as many of the religions we'll be talking about, have many, many branches. But in general, in Hinduism, they have their scripture as being the Vedas, and the most probably well-known of the Hindu scriptures is called the Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who is one of the preeminent gods in Hinduism, is having a conversation with Arjuna, and Arjuna is about to go into battle with his cousins to determine who is going to lead the tribe. Arjuna doesn't want to do this. He doesn't want to go into battle. He doesn't want to be killed or kill anyone else. And Krishna gives him a talk for about 2 hours while they're waiting to go into battle that basically summarizes what I would say is the essence of Hinduism. On page 24, he says, "The self, which dwells in the body of everyone, is eternal and never can be slain." So what he's saying here is that our essential self is eternal, and if you go into battle, if you die, you'll just be possibly reincarnated, but ultimately the goal is to reunify with that essential self, which is part of everything that is out there. Buddhism is an outgrowth of Hinduism. Buddha meditated, eventually attained what's called enlightenment. And the Buddha didn't write anything down, as the founders of all the major religions didn't write anything down, I should mention that. In the Metta Sutta, which is attributed to the Buddha, he tells us, "Radiate boundless love toward the entire world, above, below, and across, unhindered, without ill will, without enmity." So what I think he's saying there is the extent to which we can be loving toward everything and everyone that's out there is the extent to which we experience it ourselves. very similar, I think, to the admonition, love thy neighbor as thyself. The Egyptians had many religions. Their civilization lasted for thousands of years. Usually, in order to access their god, you had to go through the priests. But there was a rebel. His name was Akhenaten. And Akhenaten, he only lived for 17 years. He had the idea that there is only one God. He got rid of the priests and their view of religion, and taught that the sun god, or the one God, provides equal access to everyone. Here is a sentence from the Egyptian Book of the Dead. I am he who cannot be known. When you think about it, that sounds very similar to the idea of God in Judaism. And in fact, some scholars believe that the followers of Akhenaten left after he died at 17 years and wandered in the desert, and they are the precursors to the Hebrews and the Jewish religion. The Greeks had many gods. A lot of them were what I call aspects of the human personality. They were wild. Zeus was the king of the gods. He used to go around raping the other gods. But beneath that, again, there was a philosophical tradition. Socrates, for example, said, I know nothing. And Antisthenes, who lived about the same time, said, according to law, there are many gods. According to nature, only one. So there again is that idea of the one God, which you see going through many, many religions. The Canaanite religions, as it says in the Bible, they worshipped idols, and an idol of Baal, who was their chief god, was found in that area, which is now Israel and Syria and Lebanon. That whole area was Canaan. As it says in the Hebrew Bible, in Genesis, now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. So basically, Abram, who later became Abraham, had an inspiration that the idea of many, many gods and idols was not something that was fulfilling or really in touch with what he considered to be the real God. The most important prayer in Judaism is called the Shema, where we actually hear, it says, hear, O Israel, to listen instead of just looking and thinking. And the prayer goes like this. It says, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So again, that idea of the one God, which appears again and again by all the founders of these major religions. In Christianity, which started as a Jewish sect, Jesus preached essentially to Jews, and he went to the temple and was very fed up with what he saw going on there, which was money changing going on in the temple. So his idea, again, was to get back to that sense of direct connection to God. And what he says, this is on page 32 of the book, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Unfortunately, in Christianity, starting about the 1500s, they had wars between the Protestants and the Catholics, which resulted in tens of thousands of deaths. Mohammedanism was started, as we know, by Muhammad. He had a revelation about the year 610, where again he saw the people of the book. He respected the Jews and the Christians, but he thought again they had gotten too caught up in ritual. He wanted to get back to a simple sense of direct relationship to God. And in the Quran it says, we shall always find treachery in others, so pardon them and turn away. Surely Allah loves those who are good to others. So the way I understand it, the essential teaching of the Quran is that if you see people acting in a way that we think is evil or harmful, that we should get back to a sense of connection to God or Allah and bring that into our lives and into our relationships. So some of the other ways we pursue fulfillment that are non-religious include interpersonal relationships. Imagine yourself in a perfect relationship. We've all done that, right? We hope that that will bring us a sense of long-term fulfillment. Well, guess what? Unfortunately, after a while, no matter how good our relationship, we start thinking again, if only, well, what's missing? What do we need to do to get back to that sense of fulfillment? Career advancement. We think often that if we had a job that fulfilled us, that we had a sense of competence and confidence and that would give us self-respect. But eventually, no matter how good our job is, we again start thinking about, well, what is missing here? There's still something that doesn't quite provide the kind of fulfillment that I want. Financial pursuits. Imagine yourself winning the lottery. Doesn't that feel great for a while, right? There's many stories about people who have won the lottery and they find out that they really haven't changed. Their lives are about the same. I have an expression, wherever we go, there we are. There are many actors, movie stars, famous personalities who we find out have fulfilled all of the requirements that we think people should have to be happy, and they're on drugs. They're no happier than they ever were. Some of them even are suicidal. Competition. We think if we win competition or our team wins, I'm a baseball fan, by the way, so if our team wins, then we're happy for a while, but the next day we have to do it again, right? So competition doesn't get us this long-term sense of fulfillment either. Let's talk about meditation for a minute. I meditate in the morning if I can, but I think I'm not unusual in this way. I find that meditation will point to a sense of peace and fulfillment, but then the next day I have to do it all over again. So even meditation, no matter which practice we pursue, the practice in itself does not provide that sense of fulfillment. On page 45 of the book, all paths include a goal we hold in our mind and a route that we tread in its pursuit. Behind all goals is a hope for the experience of fulfillment. So where do we go with this? Well, we're going to talk about that a little more in the last chapter, which is called The Goal. On page 55, behind all of our paths is the same goal. There are many terms we use to describe what we seek. Happiness, joy, success, peace, truth, freedom, connectedness, satisfaction, fulfillment, salvation, spiritual awakening, an experience of God. The list is endless. Now, we often picture ourselves being happy, but the picture or the image is not the same as the experience of happiness. So we might think of ourselves as being happy in a relationship or with a friend, but beneath that is what we're really looking for. What I'm talking about here is the feeling. So imagine yourself not just doing what you think will bring happiness, but what is that feeling that we're really seeking underneath that image we have of ourselves being happy. Joy, if we picture ourselves being joyous, dancing around, having a good time, celebrating with friends, that momentarily may allow us to experience happiness or fulfillment, but underneath that, what is it we're looking for? And the point I'm trying to get to here is that it's not the experience itself, it's opening ourselves up to that happiness or fulfillment, which is a place beyond words. Success. Again, we think of ourselves as wanting to be competent or successful, to have the admiration of other people, but other people can't bring us that feeling of fulfillment we think we'll get from success. It happens when we find that place within and open up to it. So that's the same thing with peace. What is that sense of peace that we're looking for? Peace is a word. What is that sense of peace or connection that we're trying to get back to that underlies the concept of peace? And so it is with all of these different areas that we pursue. On page 60 of the book, we allow ourselves happiness when we believe that our expectations are met, and plunge into unhappiness when we believe they fall short. Our experience of fulfillment has much to do with the view we adopt. And what I mean by that is when we walk down the street, we divide the world into good things and bad things. We divide people that we know and just people we meet into good and bad. It's an automatic thing that we do. We say this person is probably a good person, maybe because we think they look like us or they're acting in a way that we approve of. So when we interact with other people and the world, we have an idea of our mind of the way they should act or the way the world should be. And then when people or the world meet our qualifications, we allow ourselves to be happy. We allow ourselves to feel fulfilled. Another area that we do this in is the spiritual and the mundane. We have this idea that if we go to church or synagogue or temple or the mosque, when we get there, we'll have a spiritual experience. But if you're really honest with yourself, I think it doesn't always happen that way. I know for me, when I've gone to a synagogue, I've also gone to a lot of other types of places of worship, like churches and mosques. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. What brings us a sense of fulfillment is being able to or willing to open up to that sense of fulfillment or peace within us. Life and death, another way that we divide the world, seems pretty obvious, right? We see people, they're alive, and animals and plants, right? There's life, and everything else is not alive, right? In Genesis, we'll take a religious point of view first, and then we're going to get into a little bit of a scientific point of view. In Genesis, it says, this is on page 64 of the book, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." So we're usually willing to admit that we came from dust, or all that is out there, and we're going to return to that eventually, right? But something we rarely consider is the fact that right now, in this moment, we are still dust or earth or all that is out there. Right now you're breathing in, right? You are exchanging air, oxygen, and carbon dioxide with the world out there. The reason we can't see it is because we're not designed to see it, which is a good thing because we'd be bumping into things all the time, right? But the fact is we're in constant interchange with the world out there. If you've eaten in the last 24 hours, you're digesting. It's a constant process, digesting, and then it goes out the other direction, right? So we are constantly in flux. The reality of who we are in our body is something that we believe in, and it's a good thing because that has allowed us to evolve to the point where we are. It's involved with our success as a species, so that's a good thing. But again, we try to go back when we can to that sense of spirituality and connection whenever we can. Let's take a bit of more of a scientific point of view here. Probably some of you know that in the 1920s, Edward Hubble looked through his telescope, like a lot of people did, but he was extremely bright, and he was able to determine that the universe is expanding. So if the universe is expanding, going in the other direction, it all started at one point that scientists used to call the Big Bang. Now sometimes they just call it the Big Whimper because it wasn't really maybe a bang. So from that point on, there was this ongoing flow of reality in the universe as far as we can see. But what we tend to do in our minds, we divide the history and prehistory into segments. For example, we'll say that the universe was created 13.5 billion years ago, and the Earth came into existence 4.5 billion years ago, and the dinosaurs came about 200 million years ago, and people like us started coming around maybe 200,000 years ago. But the reality is that all there really is an ongoing flow. So we think of ourselves as having come about at a certain point, and we divide history and prehistory into all these divisions. But the reality is that from even a scientific point of view, if we allow ourselves to go there, all there is ongoing flow, ongoing continuation, which is going on right now in this very moment. Excuse me. Heaven and hell. We have again an idea that maybe there's a heaven up there, or utopia, or for some religions, nirvana or enlightenment. And we think that maybe we're going to get there someday. The problem is, let's say we're up in heaven right now. If we continue to think about what happened in the past, or worry about the future, or think of ourselves as separate from everything that's out there, when we get to heaven, we're going to have exactly the same experience we have right now. Sorry about that, but that's kind of the way it is. So it's not going to make any difference to get to heaven. We have to be able to accept or allow that experience again of connection or fulfillment within. Forgiveness and blame. We find people out there who we think are worthy of our forgiveness, and others who we blame and we hold a grudge sometimes against people, sometimes for our entire lives. I'm going to read you from page 66. Our failure to forgive may or may not affect others, but it definitely hurts us and leaves us stuck in the past. So you may think you don't want to forgive me, or I may not want to forgive you, but if I don't, I'm hurting myself, because you may not give a damn about whether I forgive you or not. It doesn't really make that much difference to you. So I hurt myself. We hurt ourselves by being unwilling to forgive others. In the Christian Bible, Matthew, it states, "Judge not, that ye be not judged." So it's not that in the future we're going to be judged, but in this very moment, if we judge other people, then we experience that judgment or that separation. On page 68, I get into what's called freedom and constraint. Regardless of whether we are physically free, we only become truly free when we escape from the entrapment of our minds. There have been many people who have been in prison. Some of them have been an inspiration to many others. Among them are the Apostle Paul, Boethius, Gandhi, Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Viktor Frankl, and all of them have written either from prison or after prison about how their minds were free. So if I decide that right in this moment I'm going to have an experience of constraint, I can do it, and you can do it right now. Just imagine yourself being constrained. You can actually bring that on yourself. Now imagine yourself being free. Start breathing, right? You have a whole different type of experience. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl says, "Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." So again, we're going to get into this a little bit more. Our sense of freedom is a choice about whether we think of ourselves as being this isolated individual who is subject to all the things that happen to us, or thinking of ourselves as being more connected to what is out there. Child and adult. We divide ourselves again into children and adults. We think that when we get to be 18 or 21, depending on our society, we become adults. All of a sudden, we're adults, right? Guess what? I don't know about you, but I have a lot of things that go through my mind that are similar to what I had when I was a child. I react to things. I get angry. I get upset. Maybe you don't have that experience. I doubt it. Again, Matthew, Jesus admonishes his followers to learn from children. "Unless you change and become like little children, you never will enter the kingdom of heaven." So children are, if you notice, the reason I think we find them enjoyable, we enjoy their company, is they're kind of loose and they're relaxed and they look at you directly. Whereas when we get to be adults, it's more like, I'm Steve, and I look like this, and I sit like this, and I'm separate from everyone. And that's how we start to create our sense of separateness. On page 73, I discussed the racial divide. We divide ourselves into races so we can know who is like us and who is not. Race also can be an excuse to discriminate against others and treat them as less than fully human. Other types of discrimination include religion, country of origin, economic disparities, disabilities, lifestyles, and political affiliations. When we seek someone to blame for our discomfort, we always will be able to find a victim. But discriminating against others doesn't help our situation. It only temporarily distances us from our own suffering. When we focus on people as individuals without judgment, we see them more clearly and feel better about ourselves. So again, going back to that time when we were very, very young, we looked at people directly. That is something that we want to go back to. And in my own life, when I can do it, I find I can look at people without thinking about what race they are or what religion they are, whether they're like me or not. And I am able to just walk down the street very often and have a good conversation with people just because I relate to them as a human being. And they're essentially, in the most essential way, very much like I am. On page 74, I quote Martin Luther King, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." One more way we divide the world is past, present, and future. On page 78, we divide our ideas of the world into past, present, and future, but in reality, there only is a continuous series of events that passes through the present. More accurately, there is one ongoing event that originated at the beginning of time. Past and future only can be experienced in the present. It is by our thoughts we create our world and our ideas of ourselves. The objective world, if it exists, remains forever unknown, although by paying close attention and listening to the well-considered views of others, we may bring our concepts closer to reality. This moment, the only moment we know, has no name, just as God has no name in some religions. So you may notice we're having this conversation in the present moment. And you might think we can have another conversation some other time. Let's just wait a few minutes, just a few seconds here. Guess what? It still is the present moment. I'll be damned. So the only time we can do anything is the present moment. We might think about the past, we might plan for the future, but the reality is that in our ability to do anything, this is the only moment that exists. There's someone you may have heard of that had a similar point of view. His name is Albert Einstein. And Albert Einstein wrote, "For people who believe in physics, the separation between past, present, and future has only the importance of an admittedly tenacious illusion." So Einstein put out the point of view that, and this ties to his idea of relativity, that the only thing we know about what's out there is our concepts. We don't really know what is reality. And believe it or not, Einstein had a very spiritual point of view based on that, which is that our concepts are limited, so reality, whatever that is something that our concepts never can bring us to. What he said is, to sense that behind anything that can be experienced, there's something that our minds cannot grasp, whose beauty and sublimity reaches us only indirectly. This is religiousness. In this sense, and in this sense only, I am a devoutly religious man. So we're going to get into a couple more areas briefly before we finish up. I want to talk about spirituality and leadership. We have leaders, some are spiritual, some are political, and there are many other types of leaders out there. And some of them will tell us that other people are good, some are bad, and we should hold those who are bad in our minds as people that we really don't relate to. They're not like us. If there is a God that created everything, then that God created all those people that we, in our minds and our concepts, think of as being bad. And if from the scientific point of view, if everything started in one place, then we have no right really to judge anyone, because we all have an equal origin, and we all are equal from the point of view of the creation of the universe, or from the point of view of the God that created everything. One more section I think is important here. I call it our choice. In this moment and every moment, we have a choice. We can maintain a belief in our separate identity, or open to the possibility that the lives and needs of everyone are interconnected. So again, there's that idea of our interconnection with everyone, and the extent to which we lead our lives that way is the extent to which we have fulfillment in our lives. Page 91. We choose the view that fulfillment always awaits us at some other time or place, or that it is ever present. So the only place and time we can experience fulfillment is right now. All paths, all truths that we are taught are someone's idea of spirituality. As we put those aside, we begin to clarify our own truth, which may or may not be easily put into words. So looking around, where I am right now, or wherever you are, this very moment has no name, just as God has no name in some religions. We only name things when we start to look at the past again, or the future, or divide ourselves from what is out there. On page 92, the bodies in which we dwell always will experience the fears and anxieties that flesh is heir to. But that is not our truest nature. Rather, we are the one who never perishes. This understanding is based not on faith, but on direct experience when we pull back our facade of separation. It is what we see when we return to the universal consciousness with which we are born. There's another person who expresses this point of view, probably the most important thinker in Christianity. His name is Thomas Aquinas, and in the 12th century he wrote his Summa Theologica, which is a summary of all of his ideas. Just as the soul exists wholly everywhere in the body, so God exists wholly in each and everything. And what I think he's saying here is that God, to the extent there is a God, is in everything, and everything, including us, and every person is in God. So from that point of view, I wrote what I call 10 spiritual principles. To be real clear, these are not commandments. From that point of view, you might have your own spiritual principles, and that's fine. But what I want to emphasize is that we, from this point of view, we should go back and can go back and lead our lives. It's not like we should. It's not like we should we should spend our whole lives waiting to get to that sense of fulfillment. And if we get fulfilled, just to sit around and and to feel fulfilled. This is something we can bring back into our lives instead of waiting for our lives to bring it to us. So, 10 spiritual principles. All religions and ideologies are based on a view of universal truths. As we come closer to identifying and living those truths, we approach the nature of the presence, who is everywhere. Truth and God are found in the direct apperception of all that surrounds us, and the understanding that precedes and supersedes all words. Number 2, when we revert to our original view, we return to an awareness of the divine presence in our world, others, and ourselves. When in touch with our true selves, we no longer seek fulfillment. Rather, we bring it into our actions. We only can make that choice in this moment. Number 3, nothing is as we think it is. What does exist is the ongoing thrust of time and motion. There only is the continuous flow of the one event of which we are a part. The world of things is a fabric of our minds. Number 4, happiness, sadness, and every other human emotion courses through us at its own pace. Fighting our feelings is futile, but allowing them to be there lets them move through us as we and they are transformed. Number 5, all of creation is sacred. Therefore, we try to respect everything and everyone. We cause harm only as needed for survival. Number 6, past, present, and future only can be experienced in this moment. Fulfillment cannot be attained in the future because it always is the present. Therefore, we honor this moment and all that is in it. Number 7, all we know of the world is our concepts. Therefore, we keep in mind that we really know nothing. As individuals, we only are aware of our view of what is true, paying attention to the world around us and communicating with others for the purpose of aligning with truth brings us closer to greater understanding, greater compassion, and more effective action. Number 8, there only is now. Therefore, we already are here and now, including our ideas about the past and future. Number 9, God, or the force that governs the universe, is immutable and everywhere at once. Therefore, we all are in God and deserving of utmost respect. Number 10, our true or essential self always is with us. All paths that attempt to lead us there are futile. In the moment we stop seeking, we simply experience being here, which is where we long to be and already are. We have arrived home, although we never really left. Soon, once again, the path will beckon as we play the game of existence, realizing that we are on the path and at our goal at the same time. So if you want to reach me, Steve at thefutureofdemocracy.net. That's Steve at thefutureofdemocracy, one word, .net. And thanks for listening.